And good afternoon, everyone. Hello, I'm Tina Brock, and I am your host for Into the Absurd. I'm the producing artistic director here at the Idiopathic Ridiculopathy Consortium, and very, very glad that you have joined us today. Welcome, welcome. If you're coming in Zoom, we look forward to hearing your questions for our guest, Nicole Taylor, today, and we'll get to introducing Nicole in just a couple of seconds, but a very quick couple of housekeeping things for you this afternoon. If you are in on Zoom and you have questions for Nicole, definitely get them in the chat box. I want to say a big thank you to Erica Holscher and Bob Schmidt, who are our front of house folks today. If you have drink orders or dinner orders virtually and you'd like to put them in the chat box, please go ahead. I can't guarantee what we'll come up with, but we certainly want to hear what you're thinking today here on Into the Absurd. This is our, of course, our 50-minute chat that we come to you with every week. We explore the existential world we're living in right now, and the guests who are doing very interesting things out in the world. And we're asking you and hoping that you'll share the world and share the word with folks in your community, and let them know that we're here Saturdays at 5 p.m. for the foreseeable future, even after we get back on the stage. So all of that happening here at the IRC. Oh, and also want to let you know that if you're interested in seeing past guests that have been on the IRC, head on over to the Idiopathic Ridiculopathy Consortium's YouTube page, and there you can subscribe and spread the word as well. So on today's show, Nicole Taylor. Nicole is an author and a wellness teacher. She has written a book called A Joyful Pause, 52 Ways to Love Your Life. And a couple months back when we were doing the show, it occurred to me that one thing I know I certainly could use was to discuss more about the ways life had become out of balance and the ways to work on that. And so that prompted a conversation with Nicole, and I'm very, very excited to welcome her to the table today. Nicole Taylor, welcome to Into the Absurd.
Thank you. So happy to be here with you, Tina.
This is a conversation, Nicole, I feel is, I was saying to you before the show, we go out, we're on our daily walk, you run into people in the neighborhood. It's so good to see everybody. The inevitable question that, is, how are you doing? And one thing that's become a theme really over the last couple of months, understandably, no question about it, is just, wow, I feel like my head is spinning or things are out of balance. And so I am very interested to dig into A Joyful Pause. Now, let's start there, if we could. You wrote this book, correct, before our pandemic, is that right?
Oh yeah, I wrote this, well, it was published in August of 2018. So who knew that, 2 years later we would be in a pause. It's so wild.
A big pause, right? Was there a specific thing that happened in your life, a specific event or a happening that made you realize you needed to write this book?
Yeah, I was going through a big life transition and just feeling a little bit unmoored and unsure of, even who was I anymore. And I started doing little things every day. Like life felt pretty overwhelming during that transitional time. And I was like, I don't feel like I can sit down and, meditate for a half hour or do something really huge, but I can do these tiny little things every day that help me to kind of come back to myself. So I was living in Fairmount at the time, and I just would write these things on a Post-it, and it would be like, living room dance party. Great, let's do that. Take a walk in the woods, but really notice all of the information coming in through your senses. Sing along to your favorite song at the top of your lungs, and it doesn't really matter, what it sounds like. Don't judge yourself. And just little things like that really helped me to reclaim both my sense of presence, but then also just finding that even when you're going through something really hard, even when the top level emotion doesn't feel that great, building the ability to just be with yourself in that, almost as if you're holding your own hand as you would a friend that's going through a hard time. For me, that opened up this undercurrent of joy that I wasn't aware of when I was just kind of only noticing that top level feeling or spending a bunch of time trying to run away from that feeling.
Mm-hmm. When you say you felt unmoored, did it feel like you had abandoned yourself, or somehow was the feeling, when I say abandoned, I just mean that it's that lack of presence, right? It's that inability to sort of stay with the thing at the moment, the underneath part of what you're talking about. Is that what
Yeah,
it felt like?
definitely. I think, sometimes in life we're just kind of going along, and um sometimes other relationships might start to take precedence, and that's important. Like, we need family, we need community, we need partnership. But I think I was at a point where I had neglected my relationship with myself, essentially. And then when I had that big life change, that was the unmoored feeling, was when you don't
Mhm.
have yourself and something big happens, you're kind of grasping at straws. And so those 52 ways were little ways to kind of rebuild that relationship, essentially. And I think that's no different than, um, you know, any transition. I was going through a divorce at the time, but, I think a pandemic is the exact same thing, where we thought life was going to be a certain way. And then something completely out of our control changed the trajectory. And we're all managing that in different ways. So anytime you have a big transition, there can be that sense of like, whoa, where am I? What's going on? Who am I? And it's an opportunity, although it's not easy. I think it's definitely an opportunity um, to rebuild that sense of presence, so you can really be with yourself in whatever the transition is, whether that's a
Mhm.
relationship ending um, or being in the house for quite a few months.
So is the idea behind the sort of 52 things that you can do, is that while you're working on the larger structure of the building, perhaps
Mhm.
those things are touchstones that can, um, as you say, bring us back to ourselves?
Yes. And I think also I was trying a bunch of things and seeing which ones would work for me. So when I wrote the book, I put 52 in there because not all of those activities are going to necessarily resonate with everyone. But my hope was that if out of 52, you found 10 things that really helped you to feel kind of with yourself and in yourself, and therefore more present for life and the people around you, that you could take those 10 things and kind of build a practice of that.
Mhm.
So that was really the hope, like, okay, man, if living room dance party is your jam, then do that. Do
So
that.
tell
Make
me
that a
about
part of your day.
tell me about living room dance party. It's literally just have a party with yourself in the living room. Is that the
Yeah. Yeah. Do
simplicity
you
and the
ever
genius of it?
well, I found this thing of like, sometimes you can have so much fun alone. And like, I love people, and I love being around people. I am an extrovert, but at the same time, if you put on a really good song and you just dance your heart out, it feels like you're in the middle of this huge party and it's just you.
Mhm.
And there's also this piece of some of emotion wants to move through, and actually, there's an arc, there's a beginning, middle, and end of a wave of emotion, but sometimes we don't let it flow all the way through. Either we push it away, or we kind of get too intense about it. And so sometimes that can get stuck in your body. And
Mhm.
dancing is such an amazing way to really move through anything that got stuck in your body. So that's part of it's fun, but it's also kind of like a somatic exercise of, you put that music on, you flail, you dance, you're by yourself, so it doesn't matter what it looks like. And then at the end, anything that felt stuck just feels like it just kind of releases, and you can feel this really deep exhale at the end of that. So that's one of the pauses that I love to do. And especially working from home, it's so genius because you might be, having like the world's longest, most boring Zoom call for your job. And as soon as it's over, to shift the energy, living room dance party is a great way to just kind of
Mhm.
shake off what was and come back to what is right now in this
Mhm.
moment.
Give me some more examples. What are some other favorites of yours that you found to be particularly useful for you?
Yeah, I really love drawing my emotions, and that can be anything from colored pencils to pastels to, if you have some sort of, kit where you have watercolors, that's great too. But it's really just when you have a big feeling, or when you're feeling, it doesn't matter what the feeling is, could be joy, could be anxiety, just sitting with paper and some sort of implement, and trying to get it out of your head onto paper, it's so beautiful. I find that it helps me kind of get clear of like, oh yeah, I feel anxious. And that's okay. I think there can be so much energy in trying not to feel something that it actually keeps it going. So even just painting what it feels like in the moment, I have found that to be really useful. So that's one that I love. And I used that a lot um, about 3 weeks into quarantine. First, I was kind of like, oh, well, I had just gotten back from India. And so I kind of wanted to be home because that was such an intense trip. So I was kind of almost enjoying it. And also not really, because I hadn't been reading the news, I wasn't really clear on like what a big deal it was at first. And then a few weeks in, when it landed, like, oh, wow, this is real. Then the anxiety came up. And I just remember getting some pastels and just drawing what that felt like. And it looked crazy, but it felt really good to get that out onto paper. Yeah.
Were you in India to study? One of your areas that you work in is Ayurvedic medicine. Is that right?
Yep, I am an Ayurvedic health counselor. I was not studying that at the time. I was on a different retreat, but yeah, it was just an amazing experience. So yeah, we can talk a little bit about, I have 3 different ways that I first helped myself and then learned how to use that to help other people. One is yoga and meditation. In my 20s, I had depression, and yoga was a medicine for that. Like I would do a yoga practice and I would feel so great afterward. And I just got really, really into it. And ultimately wanted to bring that out into the world more. And then once yoga and yoga leads to meditation, you're kind of doing these postures and practices in order to get your energy balanced so that when you sit down and practice, you feel like you're willing to sit for 20-30 minutes. So meditation was really closely linked to yoga, and I started teaching that as well. And Ayurveda is the sister science to yoga. Ayurveda means the science of life, and basically we look at life through the lens of the 5 elements and how those interact both in the larger scape, the larger universe of nature, and also our own nature. That's what Ayurveda is. And conscious living is the other modality. And I studied for quite some time with Gay and Katie Hendricks. And that really is all about bringing presence and connection to daily life, but mostly through understanding that our body and our minds are so closely linked. It can be really easy to kind of get only up into your head about things. And so what I love about conscious living is you're constantly coming back to how does that feel in your body, and noticing where you hold emotion in your body. And I imagine in your work in theater that that's a huge part of
Right.
that. Yeah.
Well, it talks about it's an instrument, and when it's
Yeah.
flowing freely, or when it gets blocked up, or when the actor gets anxious, which I do, there's just not a day that doesn't go by, and then it gets blocked somewhere that is just not free flowing enough, right? So do you find, so if I come to you and I say, Nicole, I'm totally out of whack and I'm totally out of balance, how do you know what kinds of questions do you ask me? I go to a in traditional medicine, they take some blood tests and they do some studies and they write a patient note and they say to me, okay, you have, gastritis, or you have whatever you have. How does Nicole, or how do practitioners of wellness go about breaking it all down to know what the best way to heal is?
Yeah, that's a great question. Often people come with a particular thing in mind. So often they've seen something about conscious living and they want to learn more about that, or they've seen something about Ayurveda and they want to know more about that. My favorite thing is if someone comes to me for, let's say they come to me for conscious living and we're kind of going through where you feel different emotions in the body and some of the protocols and in that modality. If I start to hear that their day is kind of variable and all over the place, that's when I'll say, hey, have you ever heard of Ayurveda? I might talk to them a little bit about that, because Ayurveda is really great at supporting people in creating daily routine. And daily routine is such a huge part of just how we feel comfortable in ourselves and how we self-regulate, you know? So if I heard that in any other work that I was doing, I would offer that we can talk about the daily routine or dinacharya that Ayurveda offers.
So I would imagine that during the pandemic, that's part of what's throwing everything out of balance is the structure issue, right? The sort of daily
Yeah.
routines, as you say, because even if you were a person who was furloughed or lost a job, or even, and if you weren't a person, it's still just the change of your environment, the people in the house. You were saying that you got a new dog, and that is, that's kind of changing the energy. I'm guessing that the people that you're working with during this time still have to rebalance the balance, right? What was the balance prior to the pandemic now needs to be looked at again. Is there anything you found in working with people during this time that seems to be an overriding theme? A place.
Yeah.
What have you found?
Yeah, definitely the feeling of being out of sorts because there's no routine is the number one thing. And I've been working with clients to kind of look at their day and say, how can we add some structure? Can you wake up at the same time every day? Can you make sure that you have, that you're eating breakfast, that you're eating lunch, that you're eating dinner, and making that at a consistent time? Can you look at your day and see when you would be willing to fit in some movement? Because we really need to be moving our bodies, whether that's taking a walk or whether that's, using your gym's Zoom classes. Moving the body every day is really important. And then how are you making space for the sacred, honestly? So whether that's meditation, whether that's contemplation, whether that's getting into nature, whatever it is for that person. I cannot define that for people, but whatever puts them in touch with that something bigger. How are you making time for that every day? Not leaving it for weekends. Weekends you can have a bigger dose, but how do you make time for that every single day? So kind of when are you eating? Are you waking up consistently? Are you making time for sacred? Are you moving your body? And then are you going to bed around the same time too? That can be really dysregulating to be, asleep at 10 one night and then 1 in the morning the next night and then 11 the night. Like that's, that can be super dysregulating. So trying to work with folks to see how much structure they're willing to bear. And, always kind of titrating as well, because if someone's just been kind of doing whatever for the last 3 months, it's not going to work for them to all of a sudden become extremely scheduled. It's too much of a gap. So it might look like, okay, well, let's begin with, can you commit to going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time for the next few weeks? And then once they get that in their body, they feel the benefit of that. Then they're like, ooh, okay, what else? And so that's usually how it works, is meeting them where they are and then helping to move them towards something that would just help them to feel better.
That is one thing I've heard a lot from people, is the sleep inconsistency is problematic, and then causing it, has a lasting effect the next day, the day after that. So it feels like that's a big one. And isn't sleep one of the big parts of Ayurveda? Isn't that a big component of studying like Ayurvedic? That I mean, it's easy to say that sleep is important for everything, but I thought I remembered reading that that was a big aspect.
Yeah, because there's so much. So I think one thing that's really great about Ayurveda is this idea of aligning with nature's rhythms. And essentially, Ayurveda looks at everything through the lens of these time periods that are also called doshas. So the dosha of Pitta, which you may have heard, someone who is Pitta dominant might have, um, they might be someone who shows leadership qualities. There might be an intensity about them that might be really comfortable, kind of being on a stage, being in front of people. And that's when that element of fire and water is in balance. When that's not in balance, that might come out as irritation, frustration, kind of like those heated emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But the Pitta time of day is 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. So part of what we want you to do in Ayurveda is to start the wind down before 10 p.m. so that you can already be ready for sleep before you come into that time period. Does that make sense? So you think of people say they get their second wind,
Mm-hmm.
but that's because they're coming into that other time period that's characterized by being hot and sharp and light. And so we actually do suggest beginning the wind down maybe 45 minutes before you want to be asleep. So I would tell clients, sleep wants to be ushered in. You can't watch, I remember, it's like, oh yeah, I'm watching Game of Thrones and I'm going to bed. Like, no, I'm not. You can't, that doesn't work like that. So it's essentially that, you want to start shutting down your electronics by 9:15, and not really doing much that's stimulating so that you can allow your nervous system to start to let down and relax so that you can come into sleep by 10. So
Mm-hmm.
usually I tell people, electronics off by 9:15. If you're a reader, that's great, but try to read on paper, or at a minimum, read on a Kindle that's not backlit. So you're not getting that, light that can start to wake you back up.
Mm-hmm.
Find some sort of evening ritual that supports moving towards sleep. So that might look like chamomile tea, sleepy time tea. There's an Ayurvedic restorative beverage that you can drink at night that is a bit of milk with some turmeric and nutmeg and honey. And that's really soothing to the stomach and can really help relax you. And so it's all about, almost like cocooning yourself into this calm state so that you can fall asleep before that engine kind of revs back up.
Oh, okay, I see. So you want to get to that place if you're, say, a pitta, in that is your, well, you want to get to sleep before that time frame that you were talking about, right?
Exactly. And yeah. And no matter what your dosha is, whether you're a pitta, a vata, or a kapha, this time period of 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., that's the same for everyone. So we
Oh,
all want to start calming ourselves down 45 minutes before we want to sleep so that that engine doesn't rev back up.
mm-hmm. So can you explain the other two, a little bit
Yeah.
about the other two types? So we have basically three types, right? That are based on
Yep.
water, air.
Yep.
Well, go
5
ahead. Yeah.
elements. Yeah, yeah.
The five
So in Ayurveda, this is so fun for me. I love anyone who wants to talk Ayurveda with me. I'm like, yes, because I think it could be so helpful for all of us, especially now. So we look at everything through the lens of the 5 elements, and that's earth, water, fire, air, and space. Sometimes I might say ether, but those are the 5 elements. And when you think about looking at the universe, right, like dirt would be earth, our rivers and oceans would be water, the sun is fire, we're breathing air, and we're in space, right? And when you look at your own body, you can see those elements as well. Like your physicality will feel more like earth.
Mhm.
And water, you have blood flowing through your veins, and heat, fire, you have heat in your body, your metabolism, your synapses firing. Air, you have air in your lungs, and space, you have cavities, you have spaces in your body. So you can see that everything that nature has, we have. The doshas are how these elements bind to the flesh. So earth and water bind together to form kapha, and kapha is essentially responsible for our physical structure. And people that have kapha as their nature, they tend to be loving, kind, loyal when they're in balance. They are very stable people, and they're people you can rely on. When they're out of balance, what starts to happen is those same qualities of stability can turn into stuckness. So there might be a stuckness, a hoarding, and inertia. That's what happens when that goes out of balance. We talked about pitta, so that's
Mhm.
fire and water. We talked about that. And then vata is air and space. And that's responsible for anything that moves in the body. And when vata folks are in balance, that's going to look like creativity, dance, the ability to move with grace. And that might be physically, or that could also be moving from one thing to another. They're very good at being able to balance multiple things. There's a flexibility there, both physically and mentally. But when vata is out of balance, you're going to see this kind of like scattered, dissipated way of showing up that can be fearful and anxious, um, and physically there's more anxiety, and there might be some things with the digestion that are
Mhm.
tough.
So
And
how,
so those are the three doshas. Everybody has all three because we have all five of the elements. But when we say what's your dosha, we're talking about when you were born, what was the predominance of those elements, and that's how we're saying what your dosha is.
when you say predominance, do you mean the way in which you moved? Like, how do you see which one is predominant?
Oh, right. So the best way is always to get a pulse reading. But there are physical characteristics that we can look at for the different doshas as well. So things like kaphas might have a larger bone structure. They might have thick, lustrous hair. They might have kind of an energy about them, like I said, that's very comforting. um, Pittas are more medium sized, so they're not too tall, not too short. They're kind of like right in the middle. Their body type is more square, and there's usually that fiery, sharp element. You can see that in the eyes and in the being. And then vata types can be um, they can be tall, but they can also be short. Their frame tends to be thinner.
Mhm.
Um, and there might be, you might see variability, like the eyes, the two eyes might be a different color, or there might be lighter eyes. So that's some of the things that you could see in a vata type. Yeah. But
So it's
pulse diagnosis is the best way
right.
to find out what your dosha is. Yeah.
There's a question here. What if your natural sleep and wake pattern is much more nocturnal? So how do you, nocturnal meaning, I'm guessing after 1 or 2 p.m. in the morning. How do you manage that? How do you work with that if you are just a night person?
Yeah. I've had people who felt that they were night people, and it actually was just more that that was what their habit was. And when we started working together and we dial the bedtime back, they actually felt like that really worked for them.
Hmm.
So my experience has been that people do feel better when they're having that earlier bedtime. If someone's been going to bed at 1:30 in the morning, I'm probably never going to get them all the way back to 10. But even just getting them back to 11 might really support them in feeling better rested when they wake up in the morning and feeling like they can move through their day with more energy.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to jump ship a little bit to talking about the Billions Institute, of which you are a part of that. Can you tell us a little bit about that organization and what you all are coming together to do?
Yeah, so the Billions Institute was founded by Becky Margiata, and Becky is well known for her work with the 100,000 Homes campaign, in which she helped to get 100,000 people who didn't have homes to have homes. Um, and in her work with finding a way to get people homes, that really became a model for many other organizations and many other cities. As I heard her story, or heard her tell her story, she found that some of what blocked it was actually things that happen in you that actually block your intervention from spreading. So we all have, aspects of our personality or aspects that come up when we're under stress. And if those aren't tended to, that can actually hold your movement back. So in doing her own work, she found that social change work actually really benefits from folks having a container to do that personal work as well. And she created Billions Institute in order to be able to support other large-scale social change leaders in doing both the work of social change, but also that inner work, so that there's nothing in them that blocks the spread of their intervention. So for me, it's just been such an amazing gift. I get to hang out with all of these badasses who are changing the world and help them. Essentially, I bring the self-care element to it, so we might start a meeting with a centering exercise. I've shared Ayurveda with them. We meditate together. We bring in some of the conscious living work from Gay and Katie Hendricks and really work through, emotional awareness. Where are you feeling emotion in your body, and how can you befriend that rather than fighting with it? We work through, how are you facing what's coming up that wants to be faced? And once you face that, how can you accept it so that you're no longer struggling with it? And then once you accept it, how can you use that liberated energy to choose what you really want? And once you've chosen what you really want, what is the measurable step that you can take immediately that would move you in that direction? And that's called FACT. So Billions Institute is great. There are so many amazing people, whether they're coming from the education space, whether they're coming from getting people housed, whether they're coming from animal care. There's people from all different sectors coming together and learning from each other about how to help their intervention spread, but then also being a community for one another as they tackle those things that are going on inside as well.
Was the initial discovery or point of inquiry that there are things within each of us that are blocking us, but we're not really aware of them, and that's hindering the wider spread of this greater good that you were put on the earth to do? Is that the initial kind of thinking? It said helping people to step into what they are here to do on this planet was what I read, which I thought was just really beautiful. And then I wondered, well, how do is it that you just get stuck and then you don't realize that you don't know what you don't know about being blocked, and how you're not stepping into what you were meant to do on this planet? I mean, do they come to you consciously knowing, or do they come to the group consciously knowing that they're stuck in that way, or does it fold and show itself. Does
Yeah,
that make sense?
so it does make sense. I think the reason that Becky created the fellowship initially, um, she had something called the Skid Row School for Large Scale Social Change. And some of the conscious living tools were a part of that. And she said that folks came to her and like, I love this part. Like, this is all this other stuff is great, but I really want to dig into some of these tools. And I believe that was her reasoning
Mm-hmm.
for creating the fellowship. So people do come with work that they're already deeply involved in, but I think that they also learn more about how to do that work from a place of essence. And that's the piece that you were reading of,
Mm-hmm.
how do you do this work not from a place of saviorhood, which would be kind of a hero mentality, or not from a place of villaining where you're driven by solely by the anger at how the situation is, and not from a place of victimhood where you're at the effect of whatever the issue is. But it's moving off of that triangle into essence and doing the work from that place where you see yourself as whole and you see everyone that your intervention will help as whole as well. And that's a different way um, of bringing support into the world than when you're coming from one of those other 3 points.
Mm-hmm. I noticed Bob put up to the, I want to make sure everybody sees the link to a joyful pause in the chat box as well. And also
Thank
we'll
you.
put up some information about the Billions Institute. Getting back to the conscious living part of it, how does, I'm looking for the right way to phrase it, how do, is it about like living fully in the body and feeling that you're fully in the body and trying to make a place for that and be cognizant of that? Is that the main tenet of it, would you say, is to always draw yourself back to yourself and be aware of the flow?
Yeah, I think, most recently, the work has been around helping people to restore their resourcefulness. So, of all of the tools of conscious living that Katie and Gaya have created, there's really been a focus more on a few of the tools that are so of use right now as we're in this global pandemic. So, one of them is just presencing and really being able to come back to present moment awareness. And our aliveness is in present moment awareness, we create from present moment awareness, right? So there's this aspect of being able to make friends with the moment and bring your attention to the moment and be with whatever it is, how it is, that can really liberate energy that gets stuck in wanting it to be different. And it is of service to you in terms of your own presence being a gift back to yourself. But there's also this aspect of, and once you're resting in yourself, you can be more available for the people around you, and ultimately for your community. So there's always this pulsation between these tools that help you to get centered in yourself, but then also making sure that that ripples back out into your relationships and your larger community. So presencing is one tool. Breathing, it's
Mm-hmm.
so important to be able to breathe. It's something that when we get in a fear state, the breath is one of the first things to go. Either we unconsciously hold the breath or we start breathing high and up into the chest because we're very activated. And so we do spend time supporting people in learning how to do a centering breath, which helps to bring the breath back down into the belly. And that smooth, deep diaphragmatic breath can get you out of the activation of the sympathetic and bring you back down into the parasympathetic, so that those become balanced, and you're not either, you're not, kind of just buzzing about.
Mm-hmm.
So centering breath is another big part of conscious living and restoring resourcefulness. FACT, which we talked about, the facing, accepting, choosing, and taking action. That's a quick protocol that you can use or have a coach lead you through in those times when you feel stuck. Because it's about getting current with what is, so that you can choose and take an action toward what you're wanting to create. And that's super useful right now. I remember I didn't like the term lockdown when we, in March, when a lot of things shut down. Just remember feeling like, again, that feeling of at the effect of like, oh, I'm in lockdown, like somebody did something to me,
Mm-hmm.
and that way of seeing it, it just made it feel even heavier.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to think, well, how can I participate with this in a way that it doesn't feel like it's just happening to me? And recognizing that we are choosing, we are taking precautions that will allow us to not overload the hospitals and to keep ourselves as healthy as possible and not infect family and friends, right? So on some level, even though there is this mandate, there's also a choosing that's happening. And even just having that understanding that we are choosing, it can liberate the energy that feels like something's just happening to you, and there's a weight to that,
Mm-hmm. Would you say freedom of choice, or feeling as though you have some freedom despite these constraints that have been placed on us all for very good reasons, but helping people to find the ways in which they can be free from that? That's, it's sort of like this dual thing where you want the structure in your life as you move through the day, but these outside forces that feel like they're, so as you say, like heavy, doesn't feel like it's helping. I mean, it feels like that's part of what's
Yeah.
contributing to that. I just keep thinking, Peter Andrew Danzig was on a couple of weeks ago, and he's a therapist. We were talking a lot about working with just the high levels of anxiety and panic that people are feeling. And it is a story that comes up quite a bit, either just in hearing people's stories and or talking to them. Is like, I was having a panic attack, I was having a panic attack, I was having a panic attack, for people that have not, wouldn't really consider themselves to be, I don't think, people prone to that. And yet I do wonder if that isn't just a result of I mean, certainly a result of imbalance, but also I guess I'm interested in knowing what you think that is about, people being experiencing things they've never experienced before in their life, and having to look deeper for the solution to that, or for the examination of that. Do you think that the introspection is one of the good things to come out of it? I mean, it can lead us in good directions, as you say, make friends with your anxiety, make friends with your, with whatever is going on for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I would never say, I think it would be an overstatement to say like, this is great. People are suffering and that must be acknowledged. And I do think that there is an opportunity at play as well. I'll tell you, I was getting, my back was killing me and I got a massage, and I was asking the the masseuse, how's it been for you? Because I know that recently opened up again. And she said, at first I was really scared because I didn't have work, and that was really challenging for me. But I also have a 3-month-old. And at some point, I just realized that, yes, I didn't have work, but I had savings. And now I had all of this time with my baby that I never thought I was going to have because I needed to go back to work, So for her, it wasn't easy, and she wouldn't necessarily want that to be the way it was. And yet there's something in her that was able to connect with the gift of it. And in her focus on that as the gift of connection with her child, she had a very different experience than I think she would have if she only focused on the other part of it. And so that was something I really took from that experience of like, yeah, even when things are hard, it's not to pretend like they aren't, but I also think that we can still choose how we want to participate with what's happening. And that choice, I have found that choice feels empowering. It doesn't feel like life's necessarily just happening to you when you are able to choose how you want to participate with it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely an element. I think, I was talking to one client, and we were talking about knowing your yeses and your nos. And I asked him, well, how do you know when you want to do something? And how do you know when you don't want to do something? And I've done this with multiple clients where you start off with something small, and you can feel in your body when you're paying attention to how you feel in your body, you can feel when you really want to do something, there's a physical signature. And when you don't want to, there's also a physical signature. And so ultimately, once you are aware of that, you start to see you're making a million choices a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to pour a glass of water and take a sip. I'm going to turn the television on. I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to work on my book. Like, we're constantly making choices. It's just that sometimes we don't realize it because that's just life. So I think this attention to, oh, I'm choosing to have this conversation with you right now, and you're choosing to have it with me. This is what we want to be doing. And when this is over, I'm going to choose to go find my new puppy and give her some kisses, So there's this aspect of like, we're always choosing. And that helps me whenever I start to feel that, everything's out of control. I don't have any agency here. It's like, okay, wait a minute. Let me take a couple of breaths. And now what? And now, and bringing that presence into the little minute choices that we're making in every moment, you kind of come back to the sense of, okay, there are a lot of things that are outside of my control, and there are some places where I'm still choosing.
And would the theory there optimally be that your body is telling you, before you make the choice, make sure that's the choice you want to make, because then you'll be more fully present, invested,
Yes.
That's the thinking?
Yes, that you want to know what your yeses and nos are, because that supports a life of authenticity. If you're saying yes to a bunch of things that you actually don't want to be doing, that's can just kind of put you in a bind, and it's not so simple that you only ever do the things that you want to do. Maybe I don't want to necessarily eat spinach tonight. But the deeper question of, do I want to put things into my body that feed my sense of aliveness, is yes, So yeah, I love the yeses and nos practice. It's such a great way to notice what lights you up and to become aware of what are choices and what are habits. We can become habituated to a million things, and it might not be, it's kind of like that. Remember that story? There's a story I've heard before of a grandmother had a turkey and was cooking Thanksgiving dinner. The turkey was bigger than the pot, so she cut the legs off, so it would fit, cooked it, and then generations down, they're still cutting their legs off because that's how grandma did it, but they don't realize that that was only to fit it in that pot, that you don't have to do that. That's not what makes it taste so good, you know? And so I think about that a lot with yeses and noses. What are those things that we just became habituated to, either because we did it or because we grew up that way or because the friend circle we're in, that's how it is. And to be able to ask, like, do we actually choose that? Do we actually want to be doing that? Can really create such a deeper sense of aliveness in my experience.
Is that the practical way that you use the tool, is just to say to yourself, like, just call yourself out on it? Now, do I really want to be doing this right now? Is that the way the yeses and nos works? Like, if I were going to put it into my life, is it that literal, or is it more just noticing, wow, I really don't want to be doing this right now? You know, is it sort of an after the fact thing, or
Yeah.
are you really heading it off at the pass up front? Is that the,
Yeah. You're heading it off at the pass, you
yeah,
know? And
yeah.
so I love, kind of like life as your laboratory. Um, Take an hour and play with it. You have the thought, oh, I want to turn on the television. And then just take a moment and like take a breath. And then, do I want to do that? And feel for if you're getting a yes or a no.
Hmm.
And if you get a no, it's like, maybe television is just something that you do when you have a feeling, but you don't actually want to watch that. What do you want to do? What do I want to do right now? And then waiting for the answer, I love that. I use that tool when I feel a sense of overwhelm, because when I feel overwhelmed, chances are I've said yes to more things than I actually have time to do or want to be doing. And so when I feel that, like, every minute is scheduled, it's like, okay, wait, time to kind of get curious about that again and to see, am I just habituated to going, going, going? And that's why my schedule is like that. Or do I actually want to be doing all these things, So yeah, I think you can use it. You can use it at the beginning, and then you don't have to say yes to things that you actually don't want to be doing, because ultimately it builds, it's like your friend says, oh, do you want to hang out? This was pre-COVID. Obviously we're probably not doing that so much right now, but your friend says, do you want to hang out? And you actually don't. You actually need a night on the couch, because you've been doing a lot and you need some rest, but you just say yes. And then that happens over time, and it just becomes all these little ways that you kind of ignore what's actually going on for you. And that's part of the relationship with you and you breaking down,
Mm-hmm.
So it's these little things that, right, like, that makes sense.
That's interesting,
It's
the
these little,
relationship, yeah,
yeah,
with you and you
yeah,
breaking down.
yeah, it's
What do you,
wild.
oh
Yeah,
no, sorry.
go ahead.
It's just, it's so simple and so basic, and yet it's the beginning of what could be just a house fire, if you can get back to that beginning part of,
Mhm.
of yes or no. What's the single biggest thing you've discovered about yourself during this time? This time meaning since March.
Ooh, that's a really good question. Hmm.
You can think about it, and we'll come back, and we'll have you back again, and we'll talk about
Yeah,
it, Nicole. Sorry, that was a
that
rough.
really threw
You
me.
told
I
me what
love
was
that
coming.
though. I'm like, what
I don't
what
know.
is
It
the
just seems
biggest
like you've
thing?
discovered so many things, and I'm sure you've been busy helping so many people. But I wondered, um, so that's one
Oh,
of,
I know what it is.
yeah, yeah.
I had this work thing happen where I was getting a website built, and they said they were going to do something that they didn't do, and I had to talk to the CEO because they were trying to charge us for something that they shouldn't be. And I don't think that I'm someone who has trouble speaking truth to power, but I was almost paralyzed with anxiety about this call. And he you know, he tried to do that thing that people do sometimes of like, oh, well, it's kind of your fault. And I have a personality where I almost take more responsibility than is mine sometimes. So I was almost primed to like go along with that. And then I said, no, actually, based on the contract, this, and this. And then he said, well, what do you want? And I was just kind of like, like I almost wanted him to tell me what I wanted. It was very bizarre. And then I said, oh, I want you to do what you said you would do. And he said, okay, we'll do that. And I was like, wow. And that was a real, it sounds so basic, but what I learned from that moment is like two things. One thing is that you can ask for what you want. You don't just have to take what is happening. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why I was marveling at it when I was journaling, because I was like, how do I not know that? I'm 43 years old, you know, but it actually like, it actually was a huge revelation. And I really looked back and I said, wow, do I ask for what I want, or do I just take what I get? I never really put my attention there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was huge for me.
That's
for some reason.
Yeah, that's a great lesson.
Yeah.
And I guess we just have another tiny little bit of time here, but I'm just wondering, is there another book in you right now that's brewing up?
It's so funny that you ask that. I'm going to start writing it in a couple weeks. Yeah. So, you know, I have this really odd spiritual background where I grew up Jehovah's Witness, and that didn't really work for me. It works for some people, that's fine, but for me it didn't work. And it really kind of set me on this odyssey to try to find, I had a spiritual hunger, but I didn't know where to go to feed that. And so I just tried a whole bunch of things. And that's what the book is about, because I think there's a lot of people that either had a bad religious experience, or you know, they want to go and try spirituality, but they don't know where to begin. And I'm hoping that by seeing, you know, my odd story of trying, you know, a little bit of everything, that they can at least you know, at least see someone else's journey and maybe apply it to themselves in terms of it's okay to try, and it's not a one size fits all. And maybe, you know, maybe your church is the Wissahickon, and that's perfectly fine. You know, so just like, what is the thing that puts you in touch with that energy of oneness? And there's many different paths. So that's what the next book is about.
Well, I look forward to reading that book, Nicole, and to just talking with you more at some point and following this. Has been a really interesting and fun conversation. I think a lot of people are in this space of wanting to connect with each other and know more about the ways in which all of us are getting through these things. So I really appreciate you taking time. And I look forward to seeing your next book and finding out what you learn and what you can teach us along the way.
Thank you so much, Tina. It was a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Good luck with everything. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
And thanks to you for being here this evening. It has been a pleasure spending a little over 50 minutes with you today and Nicole Taylor. And I hope that you'll join us next Saturday, October the 31st, for our first ever virtual Halloween party, in which we're going to be bringing to the table some IRC performers that you've enjoyed and loved on the stages in shows past: John Zach and Jane Moore, Sonia Robesome, Tomas Dura, Jenna Kersey, Sharon Geller, John Rosenberg. They're all going to be here, and they're going to be regaling us with their trick-or-treat stories, in which we're going to attempt to try to figure out whether they're tricking us or treating us with their stories. So it'll be a fun 50 minutes, and we'd love to see you at the table. And so look for a link to the Zoom room. We're coming on Facebook Live, and head on over to the IRC's website if you're not on our mailing list, so you can keep up to date with all the guests that are going to be coming on in the weeks to come as we get through this election, we get through the holidays, we get into 2021, and we see what life holds for us. And until then, just wishing you a very creative and a very healthy week ahead.